regions and how they affect the taste of something. And oysters, we have a farm in Shelton, Washington by the name of Schreiber Shellfish Farms. And Glenn Schreiber is a gentleman we met about 15 years ago. And we purchased all of our two oysters from him and all of our manila clams. He grows them for us. We call in the order every week, and he ships them directly to us via a truck. And you know, it's a great relationship, and we get the freshest product because he harvests them, washes them, he throws them back in the water, and then the next day the truck comes and we get them the following day. So a lot of times we're serving oysters before they even hit a distributor. We're done with them. So we have great quality there. We then fill in with other oysters we buy from Santa Monica Seafood or other vendors, and really there's about 100 or 200 varieties of oysters, and I think, is Logan still here?
He is.
Okay, there's a couple hundred varieties of oysters from around the world, but there's really only 5 or 6 species that are available commercially in the United States, and one's native to the East Coast. It's called Crassostria virginica, and then there's one from the West Coast called Crassostria gigas. The virginica, the most popular virginica out there is called Blue Point. The most popular gigas on the East Coast, on the West Coast, could be what we have as the Hammersley Cove or Totten Inlet. There's also the Fanny Bay, the Hama Hama, the Quilcene. These are all oysters that are the same species, but just like a Chardonnay grape, depending on where it's grown, it tastes totally different. And what we try to do when we feature our oysters is we try to kind of give people a cross-section of taste. So we'll get a couple different species, and we'll have the same species from a couple different areas. So you might have an oyster that has qualities if it's grown, you know, everything's grown in an estuary. The oysters are grown in salt water. Could be an estuarial point where there's a freshwater river emptying into a saltwater bay. So in that area, you're going to have much lower salinity because there's a higher freshwater content. You're going to have the type of food that the oysters actually eat are going to be more phytoplankton, plankton that actually is plant plankton. And the plant plankton has more melon flavor and kind of lettuce and fruitiness to it. If it's out in the open ocean where it's much saltier and brinier, there's going to be more zooplankton, and that's animal plankton. And the animal plankton has shells. You just think of microscopic shrimp shells. Other types of zooplankton are like krill and diatoms and things like that. And in those shells, there's much more calcium and magnesium and iron and all these different minerals. So the oysters that are grown closer to the ocean are going to have much more mineral flavor and mineral notes to them. So the elements that affect an oyster's taste are A, the salinity, B, its diet, C, the species, and those are probably the 3 most important things. Oysters are about anywhere from 2 years old to 6 or 7 years old when you buy them. I'd say about 95% of all the oysters sold in the United States are farm-raised oysters. They're in simulated wild environments because they're lying on beaches and they're lying on racks, or they're in bags. The tide's coming in and going out, or they're on a rope in the middle of the bay. And they truly are a sustainable product because you don't have to feed them anything. They filter the water. They get 100% of their food out of the water. So they actually leave the water cleaner than they found it. Same thing goes for mussels and black mussels and green mussels. The farm-raised oysters is an amazing industry in the Pacific Northwest. Even black mussels are now being grown, and they're an excellent product in Carlsbad. So you've got the species of oyster. We buy the East Coast oysters, the Blue Points, and those Blue Points can be grown anywhere, and they could be called Wellfleets, they could be called Cape Cod Bay, they could be called Portland, Maine, and it just depends on where they're from and who wants to, what they want to call them. And as I said before, on the West Coast oysters, we primarily sell the Hama Hamas, the Fanny Bays, the Totten Inlets, and that's the gigas. Opening an oyster at all, the pressure is back and forth from the oyster knife. And I can use a church key that, you know, you open a can of V8 juice with, or I can use a screwdriver, it doesn't matter, a nail, anything with a little point. You just pop it into that little hinge and it's open. So now I just pop that hinge, as you see, it's by rocking back and forth, and then you take the knife and you slide it against the roof of the flat shell so as not to disturb the actual meat of the oyster, or the pocket as we call it, and you pull it off, and so that should be perfectly, and then our guys are trained to clean it off a little bit. This one looks a little dry, but you loosen the bottom muscle and you're ready to go. A little juice in there, and then these are a bigger one over here. A little bit different style. That was a blue point, much thicker shell. It's a wild oyster, not a wild oyster. They're just grown in kind of mud flats in Long Island Sound. This is the Western oyster. The way something is farmed kind of indicates where it was grown. If it's got a lot of like flutes in the shell, it was probably grown in really rough water, because it develops those flutes kind of like a flying buttress on a church so it doesn't get crushed. If the shells are really thin, they were probably grew really fast because they weren't in real rough water, and they didn't need to spend a lot of their energy creating a house that would protect them. They're much thinner. This one, you know, is, again, that was pretty easy to open. And if anyone's interested, Santa Monica Seafood is having a Shuck and Swallow contest at their Costa Mesa store this Sunday.
Be sure to join that.
Well, put that on your blogs. So anyway, there's a gorgeous oyster with a lot of brine in there. So anyone want to try one?
Heck yeah, give it here. Yeah, thank you.
So now we have plates over here. You can come and actually sample.
And Brian's going to bring out a couple little plates of some